Breaking the gray.
Sarah, how are you?
Yes, very good. Thanks, Russ.
Another fine morning here, a fine afternoon there, I hope.
Yes, we have sunshine in England at last. The sun has come through. Only took 5.5 months, but here we go. First day of sun.
First day of sun. That's great. Well, and you're able to go outside.
Yep.
Good. I am excited today because I've heard rumors of who our guest might be, but I just want to make sure that's who we're having. So what's on the docket today?
Well, we have Abel James, fat burning man. And one of the reasons we have him on is because I know you and I have struggled a little bit since we did our interview with Deanne with the keto diet, particularly. So I thought, right, okay, we need help. We need help. And I know we have a short time, but I mean, he's also written a fabulous book about the musical brain. And of course, you know, I'm all about the brain. So there's a few reasons why we have Abel on, but let's see how far we get in our short little time.
Amazing. Abel, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
It's so great to see you.
Great to see you too, Sarah.
Yeah.
Are you now? Where are you dialing in from?
We're in the middle of nowhere in southern Colorado, up at 8,000 feet. We've been here for a couple of years now. Just love it.
Oh my! I'm incredibly jealous. My wife and I spent a couple of weeks in Taos, New Mexico. Yeah, and I
love Taos.
I am so jealous. And yeah, I mean, getting used to the altitude was that tough for you when you first moved out there?
Yeah, it was, and it wasn't my first time being at altitude. Although I remember that also. I was in my early 20s and I was taking a road trip, my first time out west, and I went to Flagstaff, and I had been, running pretty regularly before that at sea level, as a flatlander. I grew up in New Hampshire and never really went to significant mountains, and certainly never lived at altitude. And that run was not pretty. I couldn't do any incline. I had to keep stopping, and I'm like, what is going on? It's at 7,500 feet about in Flagstaff. And actually before that, when I was on the road trip, I did every single thing wrong. I went through Boulder, and you're not supposed to drink a ton of caffeine, of course, when you go out to altitude and you're acclimating, and you're definitely not supposed to drink a bunch of booze. So, of course, being an idiot in my early 20s, I go and just drink endless amounts of tea and coffee. I go for a tour at the tea, Celestial Seasonings and tea, and just slam a bunch of those. Then I go to a brewery and get too drunk, and then I get altitude sickness, and it was horrible. I could not get up for that whole night. It felt like a really terrible version of pneumonia or the flu. And so anyway, it's been a long time coming, but eventually you do acclimate, and not that you can do everything the same way that you can do at sea level, but it does give you some secret superpowers.
Yeah. I mean, and the views and the just nature. I mean, you feel, I've always said this with the Rockies, especially when you go to the Canadian Rockies, because it's for some reason in Canada, everything's bigger in nature. Like the bears are bigger, the mountains are bigger, but you feel very small when you're in nature. I just felt like nature is so much more powerful than you when you're really out there in that environment.
Yeah, we're in a valley at 8,000 feet, but the cool part is we're looking up at a bunch of 14,000 foot mountains pretty much in every direction. So instead of being, New York City is awesome. And I lived in Austin for a long time. Cities are great. But when you're looking up at something in the city, it's man-made. And when you're looking up here, it's all nature, and the animals are bigger than you, and they can eat you. And you better watch your butt get down off the mountain before nighttime, because you have to have respect for nature out here. You will die if you don't respect it. And I think that keeps, the people in check. The culture is less ego-based than a lot of the more city-centric places that you might find. So we love it out here, and I do like the altitude as well, for training especially.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm going to let Sarah take over a bit, but I do have one question to kick everything off. What is your magical biohacking superpower? What is it we're going to learn today?
Ha. Well, I was thinking that we could probably talk about some combination of music or sound and unplugging and nature. I see those things as somewhat related, or at least they get you into a similar brain state. Unwinding, unplugging, relaxing. When I'm playing music and truly in flow, that's better than meditation for me. So I think it's important that people kind of recognize multiple domains. But I have some challenges in mind for you guys as well. So
Oh, you do? Oh, that's brilliant. We're
Oh,
totally up for the challenge. Yes,
Yes, we're up for it.
We're up for it. And well, we kind of took this on a bit gung-ho. And so far, it has actually been quite difficult, the challenges from our guests. And like I say, Russ and I we tried to do the keto diet. And that's something that actually we both monumentally, epically failed on doing that because it's a lot hard. You know, obviously I've got a nutrition degree. I know a lot about it, but actually doing it in practice, it's very, very difficult to stick to some of these things, especially when, you know, the guest we had on, she was very highly motivated because she was very seriously ill. But, you know, if you're trying to do it around family and things, that's been very difficult. So I'm trying to knuckle down a bit more with these challenges. So I'm glad. I hope you've got something cool for us to do, because we're kind of getting through, and the more we get into the episodes, it seems the more challenging our challenges are becoming.
It doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to be a sufferfest, whatever that challenge is. I have found much more, especially, you know, the longer that I went biohacking and self-improvement, I have much more respect for doing little things day for a long time and seeing how that adds up, as opposed to really trying hard and doing all these things and going into 3-hour ice bath and then, you know, doing high intensity exercise and breath holds and then stand in front of the red light. There's some amount of moderation here, and there's some critical threshold that you can reach, which is enough. With red light, you know, you're well aware of that, where you don't just want to stand in front of it all day because that's better. And the same is true with fasting, keto, exercise. Like there's a nice amount where you can be good to yourself and then focus on just building that habit instead of trying to force yourself through the sufferfest with willpower.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And we actually had Boomer Anderson last week, or a few weeks ago. Yeah. And he was saying exactly that. And so one of our challenges was little micro habits, you know, doing little exercises in between things, and a little bit of gratitude journaling and all those things, which actually, you know, small things, big effects. So that was very cool. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm very intrigued to hear about music because, as you know, I'm kind of the brain person. That's always my main focus. And I see I've got your book and, you know, this whole evolutionary aspect of music and what that brings. It would be great if you could just talk a little bit on that. And maybe we'll end a little bit on some keto tips and the challenges. But let's talk a little bit about the music first.
Yeah, so I've been fascinated with the musical experience, playing music and listening to music my whole life, really. And then when I was in college, I studied the brain, as well as did a lot with music research and psychoacoustics technology and different types of tunings and all sorts. Just really went in deep as much as I could because I had access to Dartmouth's library as an undergrad, and also that meant access to the whole Ivy League's library of research. So at the time, I graduated in 2006, there wasn't a whole lot of research that was readily available and out there about what music does for us and why we would even do it at all, or why we would be listening to it. Why does it get pumped into our earbuds and into every elevator, and why does it alter our shopping behavior? Why is it used by marketers to change who we think we are? You know, how does it change our brain state? So anyway, digging into that, there is a lot, and you do have to sift through quite a bit of stuff. So let's summarize for the people who are out there and don't play music. I'll make a quick argument for why you might want to consider learning an instrument or giving yourself some musical experience. Looking into what music is, the reason it's everywhere is because it's almost a more primitive form of communication, primitive form of language that allows us to get in touch with our emotions without going through the logical centers of the brain, which you have to do when you're speaking English to a large degree. In order to process most modern language, you need to get into this highly logical state, which brings you out of flow to a degree, or at least it can for most people. So learning music is something where you're able to access different brain states in more readily or more often than if you don't participate in that experience. There are lots of benefits to music listening, but know that for the health of the brain, one of the best things you can possibly do is learn new skills or challenge yourself in some way, right? And there's almost nothing better for practicing fine dexterity than some form of art, whether that's visual art, whether it's playing music. I think all these things are similar, but there's something to be said for music in particular because it enhances our ability to listen. And one of the things that I found in my research, which is a little bit technical around speech prosody, and some of the semantics get a little into the weeds, but basically what it means is if you have quite a bit of musical experience and training, then you have a better ability to hear the emotional content of the inflection behind someone's words. So an example that I use is sometimes the meaning is contradictory to the logical words of what people are saying more often than you'd think. So whenever you hear something like your significant other say, "I'm fine," that could mean 100 things, right? That could mean 100 things. And so if you're only listening to the logical language and you follow everything literally, you're going to get yourself into trouble. But if you do have that ability to hone in on inflection and emotional content, kind of measuring pauses and the rhythm of what someone's saying, you can almost, it's not like you can read their mind, but you can communicate more effectively by listening more effectively. And that is something that is super powerful for kids, adults, everyone in between.
I tend to hear "I'm fine" in a metal version quite often. I'm fine. Okay, all right. It's it's such a beautiful thing. I have spent my entire life envying musicians. I play guitar poorly, but I do it for that exact reason, is that I always wanted to be able to play, like Randy Rhoads. I always wanted to be able to play like Jimmy Page, but it's like never will I be able to ever do that. But just being able to do that and kind of get into that flow is amazing. I have a question about, and this is a little bit off the topic, but playing in a band versus playing by yourself. I've been recently talking to somebody who said that it's just that when they get into my brother-in-law, he's a classical composer, and he talks about when the orchestra is playing and this feeling you have of being elevated off the ground. He said, and he's Colombian, and he runs the music department at UNLV, and he said, "I just feel like I'm elevated off the ground, like we're all sort of floating above the ground." How do you feel when you're playing with other people versus playing music by yourself?
I love that. Yeah, it's transcendent. When you play with other people and it's really working, and you've all put in the work, you know what you're doing. That is transcendent. And I was listening to someone talk. I watched a lot of just musical education videos, and there was a well-known guitarist. I can't even remember who it was, but basically virtuosic guitarist talking about how someone asked him, like, how do you do all those notes? How do you think of all those things to do so fast? And he's like, well, I'm not really. When you're doing that and you're in flow, you're almost time traveling. Time expands in the same way like you're in a car crash or something, but the opposite. It's like the transcendent version of that, right? Where you're every little moment, and you can experience this on the podcast as well. I noticed the same thing where if I'm talking and I'm just kind of, that felt like 10 seconds for me. It was probably a half second, that little pause right there, right? And so when you're in that heightened state, you can get there by yourself, but it's definitely not the same as. So I grew up with my brother in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire. We didn't have cable television or anything like that. And so we really had to make our own entertainment. And that's one of the reasons we played so much music. So my brother became a really great drummer, and I eventually settled on guitar and singing for the most part. And that's all we really had, but that was enough. We made so much music and filled up the whole house with sound. And, you can sound like a full band with two people. You can kind of do it by yourself, but there's an amazing thing that happens when you're jiving with other people and in flow with them. That's kind of well known amongst especially improv musicians, where you all, without explicitly saying anything to each other, know exactly what to do next, and you all kind of communicate that without doing anything explicitly. Not that it's telepathy or something, but you are honed in. It's like you're using all of your senses at once instead of just your hunter reflexes focusing on one thing. You're focusing on everything. You kind of have that wide vision, and that allows you to maybe take in more information or be able to navigate musical changes a little bit better. But yeah, for me, there's almost nothing more transcendent than playing in that music, but also watching an orchestra who is nailing it, or watching some jazz band or some heavy metal band, whatever it is, even just drumming, some crazy drum circle. It gets you into a hypnotic state, for better or worse. So if you are out there listening to music, know that there is, I don't want to be judgmental or kind of hierarchical about it, but there is such thing as kind of junk food music. And there is such thing as high information music that's going to challenge your brain and really is more in tune, so to speak, with what your physiology would expect. And so basically, when you're in a bad mood, you want to listen to bad music, or you want to listen to bad mood music that kind of you can stew in for a while and then process it and move on. But I challenge people out there, if you're listening to music without really listening to it, if it's just on, especially if there are lyrics involved, listen to what the lyrics are actually saying and ask yourself, how is that different from a mantra? If you meditate and you use a mantra, or you're into, being spiritual in any way, either, like some stuff matters, everything matters, or nothing matters. Maybe it's something in between, but I prefer to think that everything matters. And if a mantra matters, and I think it does, a lot of people who have used them know that works, then the opposite is probably true. If you're listening to that mantra and it's running in your head and it's something degrading to who you are, or just kind of gross, or even just stupid and silly, like junk food music, it's not challenging your mind, I think it's important to be more selective about the music you like, focusing on some that's instrumental, that doesn't have lyrics that get in the way. And then, not that everything you need to listen to spiritual music all the time or go into Christian rock, but try to have high standards for the words that are entering your mind and consciousness.
It's so interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, sold. I believe in your superpower. Absolutely. Your superpower is real. And my daughters always say, they get in the car with me after I've done some driving, and they're always like, why do you always listen to depressing music? Why do you listen to sad music? And I tell them, especially when I'm driving, when I'm like in my hypnotic state, I need to feel something. I can't just put on Coldplay and feel like nothing. I need to feel something. Okay, early Coldplay makes me feel something. Later Coldplay makes me feel absolutely nothing.
I'm with you.
Oh my goodness.
Same with you too. I think Coldplay just said, we're gonna follow U2's trail. Right. We're gonna have really emotional political strength in the early albums, and then when we get bigger, we're just gonna write Zootopia.
Yeah.
Why not? We want to have a great stage presence, and then colors everywhere. And Sarah, you and I, let's get back to nutrition a little bit, because we've struggled. I mean, I am right now, I'm fasting once a week. I'm really trying to lose some weight. I've been getting back on the exercise regimen and trying to prepare for you, Abel, to be honest. I wanted to look my best, but I wanted to ask questions. But let's get into it. And Sarah, I mean, you're a nutritionist. Let's kind of dig into all that fun stuff.
Into the nutrition side. Sure. Yep. I was off on the music one. Let me switch my.
No, we'll go back to music. Go back to music. No. I totally cut you off, and it's terrible of me. Go.
It's fine. I've got loads of questions for Abel about that, but maybe we'll have to do that another time, because funny enough, I was thinking about all the cymatics and the. Have you studied that any, Abel, the cymatics with music, where you look at the actual information patterns that music actually brings? Because I think it's a real thing. It's a real field effect that it's having. And you're saying about junk music and not so junk music. But,
yes.
But when you look at something like cymatics, which is when they use maybe a plate and they put something on and they actually visualize the vibrational patterns of music.
Yes. Yeah. That to me is extremely fascinating. So cymatics is visualizing music with analog technology, essentially.
Yes.
Where you use this, or at least the way that I've seen it most often, and we actually have a small plate here that we haven't fired up yet, but you put some fine sand on a plate, and then different visual images that are definitely mathematical appear spontaneously with different tunings, with different combinations of notes, and the designs of the cymatics, the things that emerge repeatedly, are breathtaking to me and beautiful, and something that if it were created by a computer or an artist, you'd be like, well done. But the fact that it spontaneously emerges from sound makes me think there's a lot more there. And
there's a lot, yes, and that's probably that resonant effect that you're saying, that you get. You have to be aware that there is an actual, like, real disturbance in space that has this vibrational aspect to it, and that it's having a direct effect on your physiology, not just your mood, but an actual effect on your physiology too. And that's where the brain stuff comes in, I'm sure.
Exactly. And a lot of people think of music in a reductionistic way, where, like, if you hear the note C, or if you hear just a plucked note E on a guitar, which is just a string vibrating, you're hearing a whole sequence of notes in the harmonics of that one note. That one note is called the fundamental, but that's not actually how physics works. That's perception. We assign a note to a giant combination of mathematics that are built into sound itself. And so when you really dig in there, then you see that these harmonics start stacking in a completely different way, which can be complementary to biology or detrimental to biology and physiology, depending on the stack of that harmonic sequence and how it's tuned. Now, it's not as simple as, you see all these things on the internet of, A432, you have to tune everything to 432. It's the heart frequency, or 528 is the heart frequency, and then you could put it through my little app filter that costs $5 and listen to everything at 432. And that is not how it works. While 432 and 528 and 444 and a few others do have interesting characteristics and wonderful sound in a lot of cases, there is no, in my opinion, perfect tuning. It's more like a giant kaleidoscope. It's a big circle.
Exactly, yes.
It's interrelated and changeable. And A440 works, but I will say I do not like it quite as well. I tune my piano, which is digital, so it's easy to do, thankfully, these days, and most guitars to A444, which the harmonic sequence lines up differently, and the resonant effect on the room, on your chest, on the way you feel it's noticeably different. And it's going to be better or worse depending on the different song and the different keys you're using. It's really quite complicated.
Yeah, so tell us just a little bit more about your version of junk music and healthy, or healthy music, like junk food and health food. Just give us some examples so that we know. You've already gone into the junk side, which is, obviously if you just got the radio on and you're just letting it blare out something inane. But what about the, health music? Okay. What would you recommend for people?
If you want to get into flow, here's something really important. Make sure you're not listening to advertisements in between. Like whatever, pay the $5 or $12 or whatever it is for one of those things you can listen to, one music streaming platform or one downloadable.
Cut out the ads.
Where you don't have to be interrupted. That's so important, number one. And then there are different ways to go about it. Muzak was the kind of 80s example of the stuff that was pumped into elevators and stores to get people to buy more. That didn't have lyrics, but it did. It was just kind of, it was there and kind of garbage. Made you feel a little good, maybe, but really annoyed people like me. Like the people who practice music, it really annoys us to hear stuff like that. So, there's worse to listen to than that. I would say that most of the pop stuff is built to get you into some sort of rhythmic trance and then feed those lyrics and ideas into your mind. That can be used in a good way to help empower, like as a writer of music and a performer, that can be good. And the problem is it's just used for like now they have marketing snuck in there. They're like advertising in the song itself. There's product placement. There's just so if you go for the lowest common denominator stuff, yeah, it can be catchy and it can be all right. But if you want to listen to music to study, to read, to improve where you are physiologically, usually it's going to be something that is a little more intentional than that and a little less commercial than that. And there's nothing wrong with going back and listening to music that is quite old. You know, I listen to a lot of things that are 30, 50, even 100 years old in some cases. And we always are attracted to the new shiny thing. But in a lot of cases, like movies, if you really ask yourself, is it getting better? Are there more movies being made now? Or is it worth, dredging up some classics from the 70s? That's what we've been doing with music, with movies, with media in general. So try to unplug from whatever you're being fed from Spotify, Apple, because that's driven by marketing and commercial.
Yeah.
Who's, paying who to play music from which artist who probably didn't even write it at this point. It's just, 12 different people writing these garbage songs. So anyway, challenge yourself to find something that's a little bit better, that's a little bit more interesting. And don't forget about instrumental music. Try to listen to a bunch of different kinds and not be too judgmental about it. Because sometimes the first time you hear something, you're not going to love it. And then you listen to it a few times and you hear more. There's more there, and you start to experience it more. So try to listen to a lot of music from different places, and world music, especially world rhythms, are great for your brain. We're kind of starved in the UK and the US from interesting rhythms at all.
Yeah, that's right. Well, this comes back to what we've been talking about through this whole series, is about awareness, really. It's, we're talking about what you take into your body, and we will talk about food because I know me and Russ have been struggling with that. But we've also spoken about light and what light are you taking in? So now, hearing you speak about music, what information are you taking in on the music? What information are you taking in? I think it's all coming back to that awareness.
Absolutely.
And I hate listening to ads, you're right, but I hadn't really thought about it exactly like that until you just said that. It's a form of information, and if you're not watching what you're taking in and deliberately selecting the good stuff to nourish you,
Yeah.
I can see how that works for you. It's the same as food, isn't it? You're kind of making the same thing.
Absolutely.
You eat good food, you listen to good music. It's a very
there's something that you said, Sarah, I'm going to do a play on words. It's oral and oral, right? Like what you're bringing into your ears and what you're bringing into your body.
That's right.
It's important. I've gotten older, and I used to work in music for a very long time, and I was on every list, right? Because I used to run marketing for Tower Records, and I used to get email. I would get everything in the mail, whatever music I ever wanted, I got. And this guy, my good friend Jeff Lucis, worked at Universal, and he used to send me every single thing that ever came out on Verve Jazz, and I have mounds and mounds of jazz music. And I told him, I'm like 30 years old. I was like, I don't listen to jazz. He's like, trust me, you will. Trust me, you will. And it's only in the last 10 years where I'm obsessed with it. And I think it's like wine, or it's like food. It's like your tastes advance and your music advances, and you almost need to have that freedom to understand, of your mind, to understand jazz, and to understand probably eating foraged foods or eating mushrooms, which I still can't do. I don't know. I mean, is there a relationship there?
I think so. It's just like you don't get people started doing heavy deadlifts right away, or like complicated power cleans. And that's kind of what, if you go straight into listening to bebop jazz after you're listening to like 60s classics or something, it's gonna be a hard shift, and you probably won't like it. And it takes some degree of experience with something to appreciate that thing. And unfortunately, I think one of the biggest reasons that we've lost jazz, or it's just cheesy or not cool anymore, is because we don't dance anymore. We don't, like, the cool thing to do isn't to like grab your gal and know all these dance moves and do these crazy tricks all night. Like that, how amazingly fun. That's always been something I wanted to do. But when was the last time you saw a ballroom full of just jamming sick jazz musicians and all these people who knew these dances? So I think culturally we're missing out on that. But that doesn't mean that we can't bring it back. We can kind of reinvigorate our lives with these experiences, and me as well. Like, I actually never played piano seriously. I never trained it until a couple of years ago in my mid 30s, and then I never really cared about Oscar Peterson, who's one of the greatest jazz piano players of all time. I never really, I heard his stuff and I'm just like, I don't know. I don't get it. I play guitar. I don't care. But once I started playing piano and listening to what he was actually doing, my degree of appreciation just infinitely expanded because I could hear more. I could hear the 10 things he was doing instead of the one thing that he was doing. And that's what it takes if you want to go in that direction. But it doesn't have to be jazz. It's just, jazz is one of those types of buckets of music that absorbs the most complicated, interesting things. It's really where the like improvisational music geeks go. It's geek music. It's really smart people for the most part who dedicate their lives to this type of training and study, which is the mathematics of music and changes and sound. And that's really cool if you get into it. So don't dismiss it as just, some Ryan Gosling movie or, the backing music to a Family Guy cartoon. It's more than that.
Oh, yeah. And I think and one of the things Sarah has really shared is that it's not just music where you find these people, where you find people that are in tune with themselves. I'm just going to use every music pun throughout this entire podcast.
Well done.
But people that are truly, in tune with themselves and understand that. I think the quantified self and being, ultra aware of what's going on in your body allows you to do these things and to get into, this biohacking. And now that there's access to those things, it does. And I think the same goes with music, is that someone is so in tune that they feel like they're playing in slow motion, like you said, where like, they're able to play things by feel, in much of the same way where a lot of the biohackers are like doing this by feel now, where we had someone on a few weeks ago, Deanna DeVille, who literally used keto to save her life. And yeah, she was measuring herself, but she knew when she was falling out of ketosis, and she knew when she wasn't there. And I think it's sort of that same thing of just being in tune with what's going on. It is fascinating. And I mean, I love hearing it. So when you apply this, the sort of music structure to the everyday life and nutrition as well, like how do you combine the two? How do the two come together?
I think part of it is having high standards. Another is discipline. And then what I said about the small things that add up over time to big results, that's exactly how nutrition works. Like, you can't get big, fast results by making massive changes all at the beginning and front loading it. I mean, you can a little, but that doesn't work for dieting. It doesn't work for athletics. Like, if you really want to get results, then you have to train for a while and you have to put in the work. And nutrition is no different. You can't ever stop caring. You always have to do it. And so I see it as the day for me is usually pretty regimented. I write it out on a just blank sketch pad every day. And I write down, get sunshine. Once I do, I scribble it off, and I do my Qigong moves and meditate and red light. I'm thinking of all the different things I scribble off, and feast is one of them. I know what that feast is going to be made up of, but for the most part, I do at least 16-8 fast every day. Usually it's about one meal a day or 1.5 meals a day. So on a daily basis, I wake up, and before I really do anything else aside from make coffee, I practice piano and I practice guitar just pretty much every single day. And not that I've always done it this way, but that's also a similar way that I approach my meals, where it's just like I have a protein goal, and that probably comes first. Like, a lot of people assume because of Fat Burning Man that I'm like super keto or something like that, but actually no. I I do tend to eat probably fewer carbs than most people, but they're very important for refueling after intense lifting. After I love going for runs up the mountains. I do, sprints and long hikes and things like that. And I love soaked oatmeal and sourdough breads and the old school, for the most part, slow burning carbs, not modern junk foods. But, you kind of know that you have a budget, that you have goals to meet for these different macros and micronutrients. And then you just kind of have a daily plan. And I know that if I wake up and I do things, even if I'm messing up the scales the whole time, even if I sound terrible on that song, when I wake up the next day, I'll be a little bit better. My nervous system will be like, oh, I got this a little better today. I don't know why, but I wake up and the next day it's a little bit better every time. And that's what happens whether you're eating this way, nice and clean and meeting your macros and that sort of thing, or whether you're training athletically or musically. All of these things add up, but you can't expect the short-term results. In fact, you're probably going to feel, if you're doing it right, a little bit gassed out, a little bit like underwhelmed by the end of the day, because you've used up that energy. Your body recovers during sleep, and then you come back stronger and better the next day.
Okay, so that's good to hear. Yeah. So I think we're ready for our challenges, aren't we, Russ?
Yes, for sure. We are getting towards the end here. So fascinating, though. Thank you. Abel, that's fantastic stuff.
Of course. I would say, a challenge, if you want one that's nutritional and you didn't have good luck with keto, I would say try to make a simple change where you're trying to get at least 100 or 150 grams of protein a day. And make that your main number one goal. It sounds like
I'm going to have to get my shotgun out and go shoot pheasant is what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to come home honey, we're cooking up the pheasant tonight. 150, okay, great. So give us the quickest way
more for you than Sarah. Sorry, say it again.
Okay. Well, so where's the quickest way to find, what is the protein that you choose? What is your first choice protein?
It's funny. When I was younger, I really was not a big fan of protein powders. I thought they were super scammy. Until I took music lessons from one of my heroes, Kenny Werner at Berkeley Music, and he's also a great author. And being about 70, I saw him during my lessons. He's just sipping this drink out of this giant Slurpee thing. And I'm like, what are you drinking there? Because he lost 70 pounds or something like that in the past few months. I'm just like, man, whatever he's doing is really working. He's like, oh, I just got this little protein shake. My nutritionist told me to drink it every day, and I've lost whatever it was, 50, 70 pounds in 6 months. And he's just like, yeah, I'm not gonna make a salad, I'm not gonna cook a steak, but I'll drink this. So not that you want to be sucking down protein powders all day, but there are convenient solutions. If you're looking for protein, then they can be there. There are awesome grass-fed, pasture-raised little jerky sticks and jerkies that you can find that are relatively convenient. There's you either love it or hate it. For me, it depends on the day, but oftentimes I do love it. Canned fish, sardines, salmon, clams, oysters can be great, nose to tail foods that are right there, super high in protein. And, just in general, trying to make the protein of every meal you're eating and pretty much every snack you're eating while you're trying to lose weight anyway. If you try to make protein the main highlight every time and you eat until you're not hungry anymore, then that's going to help you not be hijacked by the carbs that just make you hungry all the time. It's going to push those out because it's hard to overeat protein. Not that you have to go carnivore, but that's kind of the reason in my mind, or one of the main reasons that carnivore works, is because you're getting protein and not much else. And if you look at the research, a protein sparing modified fast is basically an approach where you can reduce calories substantially without people experiencing hunger, without people experiencing the types of cravings that you get when you try to just reduce calories while keeping your macros the same. So if you pump up your protein, you dial down the carbs, and then you eat some amount of fat, healthy traditional fats, whole food fats, just basically so that you're not hungry anymore. You don't have to do all fat bombs and ridiculous fatty stuff that some of the keto communities into. I think for most people, especially if you're physically active, focusing on protein and trying to dial down the carbs, or at least just keep them to the green leafy variety, and save most of the starches. And if you're going to do starches, try to make them wet. Try to make them steamed, boiled, not the dry high heat, but low wet. So like soaked oats with the water still in them are going to be digested in a totally different way than like a dry cereal, if you think of it that way. So try to eat like your grandma did when you're eating carbs.
Yeah. One question about the fatty proteins. There's in keto, there's a push to eat the fatty proteins versus the fish.
Yeah.
What's your, get this quickly on that? Like, what's your thought on that?
Well, personally speaking, we've been landlocked for years now. I do love fish. I think it's great if you're in an area where you can get great fish, do it. It's awesome. Yeah. And it has about chicken and fish about half as many calories for about the same amount of protein as in red meat. That said, I eat way more red meat. I eat way more pasture-raised regenerative pork than I do poultry and chicken, although we eat a lot of eggs. So we don't tend to eat a ton of chicken and fish. I really like the ruminants and, lamb, regenerative pork, even good quality bacon, more as a topping than as a meal. But basically not being afraid of the fats in those meats, unless you're combining it with eating French fries too. Like the thing is, you can't do this and eat your French fries for the most part. At least most people can. You can't eat donuts and eat a giant fatty steak. You kind of have to choose.
But together, a donut and a steak. I mean,
side helping.
But yeah, if you eat the traditional fatty cuts of meat with the skin still on them, and it's a high quality cut, that you can't really do better than that. And if you're eating more calories from the red meat or from the pork compared to the chicken and the fish, you're going to fill up faster if you're honest with yourself anyway. So our bodies regulate this pretty well. Like if you look at it that way, you have to eat twice as much salmon in order to fill up as much for the same amount of burger or something like that. And so what's the cost of that? If salmon's like $20 a pound or $30 a pound, like it is in some places around here because we're landlocked, then that's outrageous. It's like $60 to try to fill up on one meal of protein from salmon. So there are economical ways of going about this. I mean, eggs go a long way. Some good quality eggs will get cheap people, people who don't have much money to spend on their food budget. Like that got me through college, was eating eggs for the most part.
That's a great tip.
Can I ask one question, Sarah? Do you mind? Abel, thank you. First off, thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to ask a totally random question. What would have been your top song on your playlist when you were 16 years old?
16. It was moving fast when I was 16. Let me think. I think Jimi Hendrix was a little bit before that. When I was 16, I played all the guitar parts for my high school put on Styx, The Grand Illusion, as a giant concert. And so I had to cover all of the guitar parts and sang a bunch of it too, which was really, really freaking hard. But that stuff was stuck in my head, and I listened to it in my car like every day for months and months and months. And it really made me appreciate great writing, that's a circus in an album. For anyone who doesn't know, I mean, some of it's a little bit cliched at this point, but they freaking rocked. And a lot of those bands back then were expected to be virtuosic guitarists, virtuosic singers who trained with great and sang with great technique, and that kind of went away. The standards went down, and these bands weren't like superheroes anymore. But you go back then, and a lot of those bands really were. It's amazing.
They were. And how about today? What would be the top of your list today? What did you listen to this morning?
Andy McKee is a fingerstyle guitarist. Have you heard of him?
I have.
Yeah. And so basically, anyone who hasn't seen this guy play guitar, it changes what guitar playing means. because he's playing with both fingers on the fretboard like it's a giant drum or a harp, and the different things that he uses. He literally uses a harp guitar for a lot of the different songs that he uses with playing the bass and the melody and the rhythm all at the same time. Really magnificent stuff. So that's one. And then Oscar Peterson, We Get Requests, has been my favorite album of the past few months. Just I listen to that over and over.
Sarah, what's on your list, Sarah, right now? If you had one song that you're listening to.
Well, I'm in a little bit in a music desert right now because I kind of been in lockdown and I've just been in total work mode. But I was just thinking, if you were going to ask me what I was listening to when I was 16, here we had a mod revival. So we had a lot of ska music going on. And actually, I do default to that. So sometimes, I do default to that kind of ska, reggae kind of music. So I listen, when I'm driving up, I'm up in London now. When I was driving up, I have a lot of that on, actually. Like the old ska stuff I have on the specials, I have on Madness, because to me, that's feel good music. And,
It's so good. I know.
Yeah.
I know. English beat. Yeah.
The English Beat, I've seen them many, many times. I even saw him in San Jose for my birthday once up there. Yeah, very cool.
He's still touring. He's crazy. He's still going. He was trying to tour during COVID, I'm sure. This was amazing. And Sarah, yet again, I'm trying to steal your friends. Abel, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Any parting words, Sarah?
Much, what's that?
Any parting words?
No, just thank you very much, Abel. I think what I've taken from that is we're going to go on a junk food fast, a junk music fast, and we're going to be nutritional food and nutritional music this week, which I'm totally into. And I'm going to look up these guys and I'm going to totally kind of feed on that more nutritious music this week.
Oh, such good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Aaron Parks is another great piano player. Julian Lage, great guitar player. Check those out too.
Okay, I'm going to check it out right away. Thank you. And it's so nice to see you, Abel. You look fabulous, and thank you for taking the time.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much.
You. Take care.
Bye-bye. Wow, Sarah, I am so grateful that you're here today. Not that you don't show up when we have our calls, but I'm just grateful to see you.
Thank you, and it's great to see you too, Russ.
You're in a different location.
Yes, I'm in sunny The Hague. I don't know it's called The Hague. Not like it's the London or the San Francisco, but here it's The Hague.
The Hague. It's like, it's a brand. It has like a little trademark symbol after it.
It does.
Well, I have to tell you, life-changing, we talked about this when you started talking to me. I was like, Sarah's great, but this is all crazy shit. And I will say that out loud to you, but I'm a huge believer in trusting you and trusting now the people you bring on. And I have made massive alterations in my life. First off, I started with red light in the morning, getting the sunrise, and I sit by the sun every day. And number two, my sleep has become so important for me. I bought, we've shown people these my eye patches I have and my eye covers. Unfortunately, my lab, Sunny, ate both of them. So I now have to sleep with my hands over my eyes or something. But our session with Abel, and we're talking about your good friend, Abel James.
Yes.
He goes by Fat Burning Man.
The Fat Burning Man. Yeah, what a lovely man.
Yeah. One of the best, I have to say. You're on the top of my list. He's right behind you. So he's he can be found at fatburningman.com. His book is The Wild Diet. He gave us a challenge. How did you do with it? 150 grams of protein every day?
Yeah, well, this was a big challenge for me as mainly actually vegetarian for the last year. So in order to get this amount of protein, I obviously had to start eating meat, and actually quite a lot of it. But it wasn't as difficult as I thought. And I think I have met the challenge. I've been buying great big lumps of salmon, and now I'm here in Holland. I've been eating a lot of steak and things like that. So much less carbs. In fact, I think really all I have now is porridge for breakfast. And then apart from that, I'm pure protein and just vegetables the whole day. He did
bring up the wet oats too in our session.
Yes.
keeping your wet oats. I want to declare something because it's our 7-day challenge, and I started doing this after Deanna talked about.
Yes, you were quite affected by the Deanne story, weren't you?
I was. Well, I'm in remission as well. I'm at 25 years remission, 26 years remission, but I have been doing as close as I can, and it's been about a month now, and I can declare to you that I don't feel as disgusting as I normally do. I've lost almost 20 pounds.
Wow.
And it goes to something that Abel told us, which is if you can, I'm intermittent fasting, so I'm only eating for about 6 to 8 hours a day. So I can only eat so much in 6 to 8 hours. But if you put enough protein in your body, you don't really crave the carbs. I just crave protein now. So I went upstairs the other day and there was no protein in the refrigerator. And I was like, I took a big thing of shredded cheese and I was like, is that enough? I need protein. So I'm chasing
maybe need
protein.
to stock up on some snacks.
I do.
When
I was looking at Sunny.
I was looking at a jar of peanut butter. I've got the spoon in the peanut butter job.
Well, and so I did too. And so my wife was like, where'd all the peanut butter go? And I was like, and she's like, we need peanut butter for Teddy's, lunches. But, I'm looking oddly at my dog and I'm starving. I'm like, he might taste okay. He's only a year old. I'm kidding. That's a joke. But I think, I have been keeping up with 150 grams, and I know that like one chicken, grams for you is, how are you measuring? How are you measuring? You have grams, right? I'm like, okay, how many grams?
Yeah, I know. Over here we have all kinds of funny things, but things are written in grams. I mean, my brain is in ounces, but everything's in grams. So I'm kind of doing. To be honest, I don't measure much, considering I am the scientist side. I just, one big piece of fish, one massive steak. I always have a couple of eggs. I'm keeping up there, I'm sure.
It's 43 grams of protein in one chicken breast. Like, I do way more than 3 chicken breasts in a day, right? But what I found is that I can, I don't need anything else. I mean, I'm eating lots of vegetables. I won't kick the fruit. I think on the keto stuff, one thing is the fruit is I crave apples and peaches, and I need fruit. But that's the only sugar I'm getting is fruit sugar, and I'm been going right after my protein. But I feel great.
Yeah, you look very good. Your eyes are clear, bright and shiny. Yeah, you do look very good. I mean, the interesting thing about keto is I think you can adapt it to your lifestyle. Yeah. And you say you want to keep the fruit in now, that's fine. You might want to try maybe we'll get a little bit stricter a bit later on in the series with some things that come up. But there's so much interesting stuff still about keto. It's been around for a while. And funnily enough, only today, just before we started chatting, the biohackers sent me their new keto guide. So we'll put that in the blog when it comes out. But I think there's a lot of interesting information for people who want to try this diet. We're there to show it's really not that difficult. You've just got to start making these small changes.
You do. Yeah, you're right. And, not letting the people around you, and not my wife will listen to this and she'll be like, what did you, but like not letting the people around you influence your eating, right? Let them go do their own thing. If they want to eat a bag of chips, go do it. I'm not judging. I just, for a very long time during COVID and quarantine, it was the only food we had in there. And I was just like, I don't devour it all.
Yeah,
but I give a thumbs up to Abel. I mean, we talked about a lot in our session, including music, but
that was absolutely, that was totally fascinating too. And we haven't got time to go into it all, but the whole thing about the music fast, fasting, giving up terrible music. I mean, unfortunately, I've just gone to an office and oh my goodness, I don't know what Abel James would say to the music I was subjected to today. But usually I am doing that. If there's a shop with terrible music, I walk out. So, that was cool too. But I think the challenge was the protein. So that's what we're talking about. But yeah, of course, he talked about some great things.
He did. And maybe we share our Spotify playlist. Maybe we can create a Rebel Scientist Spotify playlist, which will include a few of our favorite episodes of the Rebel Scientist podcast. But maybe there's some good nutrition tracks that we have in there,
There's certainly some feel-good music we can put on there. Yeah, that's a brilliant idea.
Well, I thank you again. Another amazing, life-changing event. I'm hopeful that people that listen to our podcast feel the same way. But thank you.
Thank you, Russ, and take care and keep up the good work. And see you next week.
Bye-bye. The Rebel Scientist Podcast is a Breaking the Gray production, created by Russ Eisenman and Paul Wood, hosted by Sarah Turner, music and sound editing by Logan Shea. For more information and other fantastic podcasts, visit breakingthegray.com. That's gray with an E, breakingthegray.com.
Breaking the gray.